Hi, I'm Cefalo. I'm a painter, but when I draw, I really enjoy using Strathmore's toned tan and toned gray papers. I use graphite pencils. I like the softer B leads, which are a little bit darker. Um, when I use the white, I really like using General's white charcoal. But the first thing I want to talk about is and by the way, this is Strathmore's toned gray in a hardbound sketchbook. Um, First thing I want to talk about is the way I think of making a mark or holding a pencil. Most of us have experience, obviously, in holding a pencil, but we're used to doing this sort of thing where you're choking up on the end of the pencil or on the tip of the pencil and doing this. Okay, most of us, that's the way we learn to write in school. Uh, but in drawing, we kind of have to relearn how to use a pencil. I hold a pencil at the end like this. It allows me to make nice broad strokes. Um, when I draw, I kind of think of my arm as a machine, okay? Similar to a sewing machine, something like that, that has a built-in motion, okay? And that's what the machine does, okay? It kind of wiggles back and forth, pivoting on the shoulder for the broader strokes. If I'm doing a big drawing on a large pad, um, in the sketchbook, I'm going to be pivoting mostly on the elbow. Okay, it gives me a slightly smaller curve, and then with the finer work, I'm pivoting on the wrist. Um, so before I make a stroke, you'll see me going like this, okay, and I'll lower in on the stroke like that. I very rarely make a type of stroke like this where I'm putting a point on the paper and pulling down. You will see me do it at times for certain effects maybe, but the bulk of the work is done with this type of broad stroke like that. Um, I think of it as like a collective line um, that single line that I make with a few different strokes. It lets the line, the edge, breathe a little bit instead of hard stifled kind of lines. I use different techniques of shading. Okay, sometimes I'll pull down hatch marks like that, and other times I'll go on the side of the pencil and do this sort of thing, almost like making a rubbing with a crayon or something. Um, it gives you different effects and textures. I try not to really think about those things too much. I try to let the form sort of dictate what comes out. Um, Kind of let it flow. Uh, Depending on what type of thing, what kind of surface I'm drawing, what kind of light situation that I'm dealing with. And this perfectly leads me to the next subject that I want to talk about, which is light and shadow. Okay, I want to talk a little bit about light now. I'm using the smaller tone tan paper. Um, I like this size because it's small enough that you can carry it around and sketch while you're out, but it's also got these mini perf edges that so you can tear off your drawing in a nice clean way and keep them. But light is one of those things that is just so fundamental to what we're going to be talking about. I think of light as a light source as kind of like similar to a shower head. Okay, shower head spray water, and a light bulb sprays photons. Okay, you can break everything up into, on a rounded object, on a three-dimensional object, into two areas. Okay, light, that is, the area is being touched, the first pass by the light source, and shadow. Okay, everything that's being missed by the light source. Okay, so light is not going to turn a corner. These photons are flying out pretty much straight at the object. They're not going to turn a corner. They're going to keep on going. This breaking point here is called the Terminator. Okay, it's a funny name, but that's what it's called. The Terminator is where those planes have made a turn away from the light source, and the angle of the plane shift makes it impossible for the light to touch anymore. Okay, it's turned past parallel to the light rays. I like to think of the rules of light and shadow as one of my favorite metaphors is, or analogies is, arrows hitting a suit of armor. Okay, so if you have a suit of armor, the arrows that hit directly or perpendicularly to the surface, okay, these planes here that are catching the light rays most perpendicularly are being hit the hardest, okay, and so the light's going to look the brightest there. We call that the highest light. Okay, it's getting the hardest hit. Somewhere in the middle here, call it the middle light. Okay, light's hitting at about a 45-degree angle. Okay, but as these planes move away from perpendicular to the light source, the hit gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker until the light is just swishing off of the surface. Okay, so the light is still touching, but very slightly. Okay, there's still a touch, but if we went back to the arrow analogy, these would be the areas where the arrows are still touching, but they're just barely swishing off of the armor. It doesn't even hurt anymore. And that's the halftone. I like the toned paper because the halftone is already built into the paper. Okay, and I kind of think of everything darker than the paper as being what I'm using for shadow. Everything lighter than the paper that I'm showing with white is representing the lighter areas, and the paper, the tone of the paper is representing for me the half tone. Okay, the darkest part of the light mass. Then we come to the Terminator. The shadow always appears a little bit darker closest to the Terminator. And there's something about shadows, if you fill them in all the way, it can look very heavy-handed. If you fill them in the same way all the way across, it can feel a little bit stifled and heavy-handed. So I like to emphasize the what we call the core shadow here. Light is bouncy. Okay, I think of photons as being like little rubber balls that are just bouncing all around and kind of trying to bounce into everything else. And as the light bounces off of other surfaces, the light will bounce back into some parts of the shadow. Okay, and we call that the reflected light. Now, even though there's light reflected into the shadow, that doesn't make it part of the light mass. Okay, it's still part of the shadow mass because it's missing that direct hit by the light source. Okay, it's part of the shadow mass, part of the planes that are turned away from the light source and not catching a direct hit. Now, where a lot of students have trouble is they'll see that reflected light and they'll want to play it up. But you have to play it down, because if you play it up too high, it can start to compete with the halftone and start to look like light mass, and your eye gets confused, and it actually destroys that illusion of relief, of three-dimension that you're looking for, okay, that you're trying to strive for. You want the reflected light to belong to the shadow mass. In other words, your whole shadow should be darker than your whole light mass, even the halftone. Okay, even your reflected light, no matter how bright in the shadow, should still be darker than your halftone in the light. Then there's a cast shadow. The cast shadow is the part of the shadow that's cast from the object onto another object. Okay, we call it the form shadow. The shadow on the object itself, the form shadow. The shadow from the object onto another object is the cast shadow. If light is bouncy, think of all those bouncy little balls, more of those balls are going to bounce into the shadow the farther away the cast shadow is from the object. Okay, there's more opportunities for those little particles to bounce back in. As you move closer into the object, okay, and you get these deep places like this, there's a lot fewer opportunities for the light particles to bounce back in. We call that, what do we call it? We call it the dark accent. And on a human, you get areas like this, like where the arm meets the rib cage, the part between the lips, ears, nose, into those deep places where the light is not getting to are called dark accents. Okay, those are the basic rules of light and shadow as far as tone goes. We have one more little phenomenon here, which is highlight. Okay, and highlight, you would expect it to be over here, wouldn't you? But the thing about highlight is it moves, and I'll tell you why. Highlight has nothing to do with the rules of tone and light and shadow. Highlight is actually an illusion, and it's a mirror-like reflection of the light source. So if you went up there, you would see a little light bulb if it was a shiny enough surface. You see on cartoons, on a really shiny apple, you'll see a little picture of a window, and that's exactly what you're seeing. You're seeing a mirror reflection of the light source. And the thing is, it moves. If you move your head from side to side, you'll watch on a live model or on any object that you're observing in person. You can watch the the highlight move and kind of follow you across the surface as you move. But these are the rules of light and shadow, and I'd like you to familiarize yourself with these terms if you don't know them. Not that many terms, it might be great to memorize them, and I would suggest making one of these diagrams yourself if you haven't before.